Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the OFN Meeting Room as we talk New York Giants football with Ryan Dunleavy, NFL reporter for the New York Post. Ryan, good to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. Good to have you here, Ryan. So I know you cover the Giants, the Jets, the NFL in general. I forgot to ask you off the air because we were talking about a Rutgers-related topic. How long did you cover? Was that like a beat for you?
Yeah, I did Rutgers from 2011 through 2016. So,
Just after, was that when Shiano left when?
11.
11.
So,
Oh, you went to the bad years.
yeah, yeah. I went to Rutgers during the first 4 years of his first tenure. So the first four non-bowl years, I was a student covering the team. Then they got good when I went away. Then I came back and they went.
Stay away. Stay away from covering Rutgers.
Fans are happy to be rid of me.
Yeah. So I'm excited to have Shiano back, by the way. He's done a great job already recruiting.
They have like the 17th ranked recruiting class or something.
Something like that. But it's exciting. So, it's going to be fun. And the basketball team, that was the one thing that broke my heart was when they canceled March Madness. I think Rutgers and Dayton were probably the two schools that hurt the most.
Agreed.
From the shutdown.
Agreed.
It was like one of those things where the first thing I said to myself was, I know I'm gonna get excited when this game start again, but it's almost like, just see me in March of next year so they don't pull the rug underneath me again. It's just so tough to take, but what they say, it's all about everybody staying healthy. I know somebody that needs to stay healthy is Deandre Baker. And this is a draft show. We want to talk about all the players, but it'd be criminal. Get it? It'd be criminal for me not to ask you about Deandre Baker. So I must, because I hear some of the stories. I do watch the Boomer and Geo show, and I'm not in New York, so that's the only New York news I get in the mornings. I tape it, so I try to understand what's going on there, and I get a little bit here and there. But whenever I hear stories like this, the reason why I don't want to comment on things like this until I get all of the facts and because immediately they wanted to throw the kid under the bridge. Now you don't even know whether or not whether he's guilty. So what is the latest?
So Deandre Baker and the Seahawks, Quentin Dunbar, and another unidentified man were, according to a police witness affidavit, were charged with. They were at a gambling party in Florida. All this according to the police affidavit. And Deandre Baker got 4 counts of aggravated assault, which essentially was threatening somebody at gunpoint, and 4 counts of armed robbery for allegedly stealing $12,000 in cash and $60,000 in watches. That went viral. He got arrested. They put out an arrest warrant. He turned himself in. And now some of those witnesses have allegedly recanted their original stories, convoluted the whole thing. His lawyer, Patrick Patel, says he was, in another room playing Madden when all this happened, absolutely did not gamble, absolutely did not rob anyone. So now we're at the point where the state of Florida has 30 days to decide if they want to pursue these charges, and if it's true that the witnesses are recanting their testimony, then it's going to be obviously hard unless there's some sort of video evidence to prove it. So Deandre Baker went from people saying, oh my God, is he ever going to play in the NFL again, to he could get off criminally and he could still be facing some sort of discipline from the league because the legal threshold is much higher. Innocent until proven guilty is still much higher than credible evidence, which is all the NFL needs to suspend you. So could still be looking at a game or two from the NFL, even if he gets off criminally.
And so we'll know something in the next 3 weeks?
Yes, that maybe sooner, but yes, within the next 3 weeks or so, unless they file for some sort of extension, the state of Florida needs to decide if they want to pursue this case, take it to a trial by jury. Deandre's obviously pled not guilty, so we'll see where things go. The crazy part is that Deandre's lawyer and Quentin Dunbar's lawyer seem to be at odds here. The players haven't, quote-unquote, flipped on each other yet in terms of, here's my side of the story, get me off the hook kind of thing as you see in criminal trials. But the lawyers are certainly pointing fingers.
Huh, interesting. Okay. So at this point, nobody really knows anything. You don't even have a gut feeling at all. You think let's just wait and see?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. You mentioned my Rutgers time. Unfortunately, I covered Rutgers during an era where they had a lot of kids arrested and a lot of kids, some doing jail time right now, some, arrested, on charges that were dropped. But I've learned my lesson. Even last year, the Giants had Cam Moore, who was arrested immediately on domestic violence, assault charges, and it turned out those charges got dropped, and the judge basically said the woman who accused him of those things was out for revenge against him for breaking up with her. Again, that was the judge who said that. So I've learned through these, and Cam Moore got basically put on the commissioner's exempt list, then cut because he didn't participate in training camp. Then the charges got dismissed in October, and he hasn't played it down in the NFL since. So basically, I've learned, not to rush to judgment on these kind of things.
Yep, absolutely. And I know, and especially nowadays, everybody wants to get their opinion out first, and it's just until you get all the facts, it's just go ahead and get your opinions out all you want, because more than 50% of the time you're going to end up being wrong when you do that, and I'd rather be 100% accurate, even if I have to wait 4 or 5 days or a week to make my opinion. Now,
listen, I'll say this has nothing to do with being a criminal. Just during my reporting the last week or so, I reported on last Friday that Deandre Baker gave the Giants a lot of trouble behind the scenes last year.
Okay.
He fell asleep in meetings. They were very torn on whether or not to take him in the first place to draft him. The Giants trade up and draft him, and then like 8 cornerbacks go in the next 24 picks. So they must have obviously had a much better grade on him than the other guys, or you wouldn't trade up. He just basically tuned out all coaching last year. There were a lot of red flags behind the scenes about him as a football player, which is not encouraging going into his second year on the field.
No.
That is still, let me reiterate, a long way from what he is charged of right now. Just because you're guilty of falling asleep in meetings does not, the next step is not armed robbery.
He's not the first, and he won't be the last player to sleep in a meeting. So, understood. Okay, let's talk about the draft. And when we did the preview, we went over some of the top positions of need, and one of the top 3 positions of need that we talked about was the offensive line. And the Giants went out with 3 of their top 5 picks and took linemen. And I got to tell you, I mean, looking at these 3 linemen, it's quite possible that the Giants have 3 starters. If it all works out, they got 3 starters. Of the 5, of course, they used one of their picks the last couple of years on another young kid, so they might have something here.
So in a way, it's all kind of revolves around that 3rd round pick, Matt Peart from in UConn. Because look, you expect Andrew Thomas, the 1st round pick, number 4 overall, to be a good player. By everyone I've called, every scout, every coach, college pros says, look, this is not Eric Flowers. This guy is not going to fall over and be an absolute bust that you just wasted a top 10 pick on. Maybe he's not a, Hall of Fame, Pro Bowl. I know Quentin Nelson plays guard, not tackle, but he might not be Quentin Nelson, like immediate best at his position in the NFL, book him to the Hall of Fame, Joe Thomas kind of guy. But he is a 10-year, 12-year, barring injury, long-term, high-level starter in the NFL. So, okay, check that off the box. You put him at 1 tackle for 2020. You put Nate Solder at the other tackle. Zeitler and Hernandez at the guards. They're steady. You still have a hole at center you got to fill somehow. Maybe it's Shane Lemieux, the other draft pick, a 5th rounder you were talking about.
Yes.
Maybe it's Spencer Pulley, a former starter for the Chargers. Maybe it's Nick Gates, a guy the Giants like a lot, who got his feet wet last year. Maybe it's John Jalapeno, the starter the last 2 years, who got injured in the season finale and is a free agent right now, but the Giants are interested in re-signing him. So you have those 4 guys to compete for center. That's your line right now. And then in the long term, Solder will probably be gone next season. And then if Matt Peart can take this year to develop, and he's the starter opposite Andrew Thomas, then if Gettleman hit a home run.
That's right.
And he dropped 2 starting tackles. that would be the home run. I'm just not so sure that was the right pick for the Giants in that spot because I think this year's team has so many holes
Yeah.
that you needed a pass rusher
Yep.
there, not whatnot.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, because the other two positions that we talked about with the top need was a pass rusher, which they didn't go after, and also a slot corner, which they did. But interesting that Parrott and Lemieux, both longtime 4-year starters, both durable, never missing a game. That's pretty rare. So, and Parrott, of course, you would hope that he has his best football ahead of him because he just started playing in high school, Jamaican kid and all that. Lemieux is more of a blue collar. You kind of know what you get. And he might actually, and he's probably even ahead of Parrott and could probably even start right away. But Parrott's got ability that far outseeds Lemieux's if he can get that far.
I think that's a good assessment. The difference is obviously the Giants took Lemieux, who is a proven commodity at guard, and they're going to try to make him a center. They're going to ask a kid who missed one snap in 4 years at Oregon as a guard, and they're now going to try to make him a center, which is a big difference. I mean, people will tell you interior guard and center is more similar than outside. You're still snapping the ball every play. It's still a thinking man's position. So they're asking him to do something that he's never done, which almost puts him on that level of Parrott. Lemieux has more experience. Parrott is rawer with a higher potential, but you're just throwing something new at Lemieux. If Lemieux was gonna be asked to play guard, I'd say, all right, maybe this kid surprises you. Maybe he plays above his 5th round potential, but the Giants don't need him to be a guard. Zeitler and Hernandez are the strength of that offensive line.
How is Hernandez doing? Because I've been kind of getting mixed analysis about his development. Like, okay, it seems like he's struggling, but now he's playing a lot better. So did he basically just have a slower than anticipated rookie season, and then he had the gradual second year blossomed, and maybe he's going to even be a better player in year 3? Is that what we're seeing out of this kid?
So here's what I'd say. I say he got off to a slow start as a rookie.
Okay.
Finished strong.
Okay.
So one of those things where, wow, he finished really strong. He gets it. He's going to take off in his second year. And he didn't really take off. He leveled out, maybe took a step back. He struggled in some situations against, he's got to go against good interior pass. Fletcher Cox twice a year. That's true. Stuff. So he struggled against the really good interior pass rushers and drew some silly, sloppy penalties. And when you had Zeitler on the other side at guard, you saw what a really top level guard looks like, and you're like, wait a second, we rushed Hernandez. He had a nice finish to a rookie year. He's got a way to go. Look, it's a big year for him. If he goes back to where he was as a rookie, or if he takes a step forward, people will be optimistic again. If he plays like he did last year, it's like, okay, maybe this guy just is what he is. He's not, a future Pro Bowler. He's just like a ho-hum starter.
And maybe that is also something that drafting Lemieux, maybe all of a sudden the Giants rethink what to do with Lemieux if Hernandez doesn't prove that he deserves to be the starting guard in 2021.
Yeah, the Giants obviously they could try Hernandez at center if Lemieux ends up being the better guard. They are in no position really where they have any depth. So they need Hernandez as a starter somewhere. They need Lemieux as a backup somewhere, unless Nick Gates. Nick Gates is kind of the wild card in all this, Greg, where it's Nick Gates is a guy he played tackle at Nebraska. They tried him at guard in the NFL. They liked him at both spots in practice. He made 3 starts last year and impressed. Shermer was incredibly high on him before he got fired. And now we don't, know what the new staff thinks, but he's a guy who's a real wild card in all this. He's practicing at center right now. He's actually out in Las Vegas, where he's from, snapping the ball to Derek Carr at wherever the Raiders are working out right now. So he is getting some work in as a center. He's a guy with 5-position versatility across the line. He could be a guy that's a real wild card for them.
All right. Well, we'll definitely talk more about that player when we preview training camp for the Giants. let's talk about that other position of need, slot corner. Because now Lemieux was a fifth-round draft pick. Arledge graded him as a third-round, so that's a good value. But Darnay
Very.
Holmes was a fourth-round pick. Arledge felt he was kind of later, maybe even free agent kind of guy, but sixth round at best. And I can see why when I read his profile, and I've seen him play. But the fact is, the Giants needed a nickel corner slot guy, but definitely somebody to fit in, match up against tight ends. And not only does Holmes do that, but so does Chris Williamson, the corner they drafted in the seventh round.
Yeah, Williamson's a guy I really like. He intrigues me. I know the Minnesota coaching staff pretty well, and they said that he kind of was just coming into his own late in his junior year. He started off at Florida, transferred, then Minnesota changed coordinators, and he really kind of found his role there in that nickel hybrid linebacker safety spot. He's a guy I like that they were high on. Like, he, even though he's a little older, after the transfer and whatnot, he might just be coming into his own. So that's a guy. The Giants are the worst team in the NFL covering tight ends for 3 or 4 years running. So that goes back to when Landon Collins was on the team and did pretty much everything really well except cover tight ends. And so the Giants were in a pickle there. They never put him with a good free safety, so they never really had a good answer for covering tight ends. Maybe it's Williamson. That's a lot to ask of a seventh-round pick. Holmes is really intriguing. Holmes is a guy, played a lot of outside at UCLA, but impressed at the Senior Bowl playing in the nickel and the slot. The Giants put a ton of, starting with Gettleman, put a ton of weight in the Senior Bowl, in Senior Bowl evaluations. That's kind of how they settled on Daniel Jones out of all those quarterbacks. So Holmes did really well there. And he's a competitive guy. They love that about him. And he's a thinking guy. I mean, he's into chess, and he's really well spoken and articulate, and he gets all that, he has all those intangibles. He checks off all those boxes for competitiveness and desire, and like I said, thinking about the game and really breaking down plays, not just relying on athleticism. So he's a guy they're really intrigued by too.
Okay.
You're right. I thought it was maybe a little high for him. I thought they should have gone pass rusher in the third round, pass rusher in the fourth round, but they're desperate for a slot corner. Deandre Baker couldn't do it. Corey Ballantyne struggled mightily. Julian Love is better as a safety than he is as a cornerback. Grant Haley was better against the run than the pass. So all these young defensive backs have come in for the Giants in the last year or two. None of them have really fit the slot well.
I'm surprised that slot position hasn't been valued as much contractually yet. Because this past off, this past offseason before free agency hit, I was reading other teams, and almost every team that said they needed a slot corner was looking at Brian Poole of the Jets. Almost everyone had him number one on the list, and I was surprised that the Jets only signed him for 1 year and a few $1,000,000. I was like, well, that's a bargain.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he had a great year last year, and I totally agree with you. When I talk to executives around the NFL, they say that one of the things that drives them nuts is the idea of 22 starters if you take away the specialists, or 24 starters if you count kicker and punter. It's not. You have to count. There are 12 defensive starters essentially. Yep. You have to count your nickel corner as a starter. The way you spend 65% of a game in the nickel, you need to count that guy as a starter.
Now their second round pick, number 36, is a big pick, especially at that spot. Xavier McKinney, third team All-American, first team SEC. McKinney's a versatile kid, but he's he's got elite tools. So you pick a guy like this at that spot, you have high hopes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was a steal for the Giants. I think it was one of their best picks of the entire draft in any round by any team. For him to be sitting there, it reminds me a little bit of when Landon Collins slipped out of the first round in 2015, and the Giants ended up trading up to the first pick of the second round to get Landon Collins. McKinney, I think, could actually be a better player than Landon Collins. He does a lot of the same stuff, but he's also got some deep center field coverage ability. He can play up in the box, or he could drop back. I think he's a good complement to Jabril Peppers, who is more of a box safety. I think McKinney can play a little deep coverage, can guard tight ends, can guard running backs, can be the answer there if you're not relying on Holmes or a Williamson overachieving. I think McKinney can step right in and be that guy day one who is the leader of your back seven. I'm very high on that pick. Very surprised. I thought he'd go in the low 20s. I wasn't surprised the Cowboys passed on him. There was a lot of pre-talk with the Cowboys and him, but when CD Lamb was there at 17, and you can't pass on that. I get why they did that, but it's almost like once the Cowboys passed, everybody either got scared off or forgot about him, and he slipped right to the Giants. I thought it was a great pick.
All right, now 4 of the last 5 picks for the Giants were linebackers, 2 on the outside, 2 on the inside. The first 2, Cam Brown and Carter Coughlin, are both outside guys, edge guys. Brown, by the way, was a 4th-round grade for our lads, so the Giants get him in the 6th. Coughlin's a 2-time second-team Big Ten. And I imagine maybe a situational pass rusher, but, I'll let you fill in with that. And Brown, somebody that you're talking about, a kid with long arms, a nickel defender as well. It's interesting that we talked about a couple other nickel guys. And Brown's the kind of guy I would have liked to have seen. You talked about the Senior Bowl. I would have liked to have seen him play in the game. I don't know if the injury before the game is something to be concerned with. But again, another guy that should impact the Giants in nickel at the very least.
Yeah, Brown almost reminds me of, like, I don't know, a poor man's Lorenzo Carter, that guy the Giants drafted out of Georgia a couple years ago. They're both long, lanky. I think Carter's 6'4", Brown's 6'5", something like that. Long arms. Both outside rushers. Carter, the guy has a ton of ability, hasn't quite hit it all. Almost like Hernandez. Started as a rookie, it was like, wow, this guy could really be something. And then he kind of leveled off last year. So I think Brown is in that Carter mold where I'd like to see what he can be if it all clicks for him. Carter Coughlin, agreed. I think you put it exactly right. A situational, high motor pass rusher. The Giants are going to have to pass rush by scheme and by committee. They don't really have a very good pass rush. No, one guy to lead the field. No one guy who's going to warrant double teams. So it's really going to have to come from everywhere. So Carter's certainly going to get his chance. Bunch of inside linebackers they drafted. Tay Crowder, and a couple other guys there in that.
TJ Brunson.
TJ Brunson, yeah, from Carolina. So basically what they did was obviously Joe Judge being a special teams coordinator, linebacker being a position that you see a lot of guys with special team experience, and linebacker being far and away the worst position on the Giants. They've ignored it for far too long, going back to Jerry Reese. They haven't had a Pro Bowl linebacker since Antonio Pierce in 2006. Yep. It's just been an abysmal position for a place that, had Carl Banks and Harry Carson and Lawrence Taylor and, back before those guys. It's just linebacker. The Giants are supposed to be a linebacker proud.
Yep.
Of Jesse Armstead in the 90s. And they've just really ignored it for almost 15 years. So what they ended up doing was just taking a bunch of guys to create competition and, bump off some of the bottom of the roster guys they have now and see who can make an impact on special teams and who can make an impact there in the middle. Right now they have, Blake Martinez, who they signed as a free agent, David Mayo, who overachieved last year for them. But they don't really have, after Martinez, a 2, 3, 4 inside linebacker. So I think any of those guys could end up being the guys who take on-field snaps, especially if you could play special teams. You'll win Joe Judge's heart.
It's interesting you bring up Pierce because it seems like, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, that when I would talk about the Giants draft, for about 3 years straight, I'd be saying Giants, if they want to take that next step on defense, they've got to get their next Antonio Pierce. So much so that for the last few years, I just forgot talking about it. It's like, okay, but that's, you're absolutely right. I mean, you would think an organization that has won championships with a, premier inside linebacker and pass rushers would kind of not forget that's what won championships for the Giants. Sure, Eli Manning did his thing in the playoffs, but those components on defense was really the key factors in the Giants winning, all of their Super Bowls.
Two things there. One, they signed Martinez hoping he is essentially 15 years later, he's like when they got Pierce from the Redskins. They're hoping Martinez is that kind of leader / middle linebacker for them
Okay.
right now. So they did, but I'm a pessimist or a realist. 2 years ago, they traded for Alec Ogletree, who was basically a Pro Bowl linebacker.
Yeah, he was overrated. I didn't like him at all.
So what was it that Ogletree couldn't do? We found out real quickly in his 2 years with the Giants. He couldn't cover anybody. Well, Martinez, the knock on Martinez is great, tackler, doesn't miss tackles, good against the run, smart player, really struggles in coverage. So did they just basically spend $30 million on another Alec Ogletree? I really won't know that till I see Martinez day in and day out. So, and then the other thing is, they won those defense. You're right. They won their Super Bowls with defense. All of them with defense.
All of them.
You're right. Right. Absolutely. But it wasn't just linebacker. It was defensive line
ends,
too. And
defensive tackles.
Tuck,
Yep.
Strahan and O.C. Tuck could have been the MVP of one of those Super Bowls. And they don't have anybody. They have no guys on the team who can get a sack. I mean, assuming Marcus Golden doesn't come back, which there's still a chance he will, they literally don't have a guy who's had more than 5 sacks in a season. They have relying on scheme to get you sacks is a nice thing to say in the offseason, but when the season comes, you realize really quickly that doesn't happen, especially when, if you look at different talent, but Patrick Graham's defense with the Dolphins last year didn't exactly rack up sacks.
Yep. I mean, that's the reason why I couldn't believe a guy like Shaq Barrett wasn't scouted properly by the rest of the league, because we had talked about it repeatedly on the Jet shows about even when he was tendered, I think, a second rounder in his final year in Denver. I was like, well, what are you waiting for? Go get him. A second round pick. Come on. He's sitting behind Von Miller. That guy has got talent. And it took Tampa Bay. And it was so funny. It was ironic that he goes to Todd Bowles and Tampa Bay when Todd Bowles sat there for 3 or 4 years as the head coach. And I don't know, maybe he had no pull. I don't know, but it's. But then again, that's the Jets. But the point is that you would think that if you can find those guys, they're hard to find. If you find those guys, you gotta go get them.
And well, I mean, look, who is Barrett paired with in Tampa? He's paired with Jason Pierre-Paul, who the Giants essentially gave away for a 3rd-round pick, which is B.J. Hill. So the Giants are, they're not paying JPP. 10 or $12 million a year. They're paying BJ Hill, $800,000 a year. But Jason Pierre-Paul is 10 times as productive as BJ. So do you want the salary cap benefit or do you want the good player? Eventually, at some point, you have to have good players. And the Giants, the last couple of years, I get it. Like, Jenkins was not worth the contract. Pierre-Paul was older. Olivier Vernon wasn't living up to the contract. I get it. So you cleared out all the the underachieving guys who were a bad cap hit. But you didn't replace them with players who are young and productive. You just replaced them with players who are young. They haven't actually produced anything. Eventually, you need production. That's why the Giants are one of the worst teams in the NFL. They don't have producing players.
As far as the rookie free agent signings, there are 3 guys that had draftable grades at our lads. All 3 on offense. One was tackle Kyle Murphy, a 3-year starter, versatile, can play pretty much all over the place, but he's at best a developmental prospect that'll make the switch from tackle to guard. And then you've got 2 playmakers that are interesting. Javon Leake, the running back from Maryland, and Benjamin Victor, the receiver from Ohio State, because if you look at it, League 3rd in FBS running backs with a 7.22 yards per carry, averaged a touchdown every 8.5 carries as a running back. Big Ten return specialist of the year, so he's going to be able to give the Giants a returner if they like. And Benjamin Victor recorded a touchdown every 4th catch. He's a big target, huge catch radius, 35-inch vertical, makes a lot of big plays. That's not bad for a couple of free agent signings.
Well, I thought was interesting was the Giants didn't draft. They had 10 picks. They didn't trade up. They didn't trade down. They made all 10 of their original picks. And they didn't draft a receiver in this historically deep receiver class. But I like both of the Ohio State receivers. You mentioned Victor. I like Austin Mack, too, from Ohio State. I like both those guys. Look, the Giants did something that we thought – I had asked around. I was told this was going to happen, and the Giants did it to an absolute T. The Giants went big school, big school, big school. It was this year with the coronavirus and concerns about, You didn't get to really know the kids and really, tape. One of the things was teams were going to focus on big school prospects more than ever. That's exactly what the Giants did. 9 of their 10 draft picks were from Power 5 schools. A lot of Victor and Mac are obviously Ohio State kids. The Leake is a Maryland kid, Big Ten. I know that's weird. They still feel like they're in the ACC.
I know.
But that's what they did, and they went to They went to guys who maybe were at big schools, who were behind other kids who were like first round caliber talents that didn't get the full run of the opportunity at their schools, but have obviously were big time recruits and have playmaking ability. So I like the 2 receivers. I like the running back. Obviously, running back's a weird position with the Giants because no matter how good you are, you're not going to take that many snaps from Saquon Barkley. So I don't. As a return specialist, maybe he gets on the field. The tackle Murphy's an interesting one because, like I said, the Giants have no depth at guard. So even if they're even at offensive line, so even if their 5 starters are set, a guy like Murphy could make the team, especially if he has guard tackle flexibility.
Okay, and then by the way, they didn't. We thought there was a possibility, outside possibility, they'd go after a developmental prospect at quarterback, not to start, but somebody maybe be a long-term backup, something like that. Colt McCoy, of course, is there. What do you think that is the plan to have McCoy there for a few years, or do you think that eventually that's going to be what they're going to do is look to the draft and try to groom, sort of like what the Jets did in this draft with the kid from FIU?
So let me tell you, I think the Giants quarterback situation is really interesting. So they then ended up signing Case Cookus as their one undrafted free agent. You probably know more about Case Cookus than I do. I don't know much about him, but I do think they have a very interesting quarterback situation because after the draft, they picked up Cooper Rush off waivers.
That's right. Yep. Garrett's boy. Okay. What is he? The MAC quarterback. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Central Michigan. Yep. So he was with Garrett for 3 years in Dallas. So now they have set up this situation, right? So Jones is the unquestioned starter, right? But now this is all Judge keeps talking about is competition. Well, maybe the spot where they have the most competition on the team, oddly, is number 2 quarterback because they signed Colt McCoy, who we know after 10 years here is a number 2 NFL quarterback, right? He can do the job for 2 or 3 games if you need him to. He's proven it. The team's not going to fall apart around Colt McCoy. So you pencil him in as the number 2 quarterback. Except Jason Garrett's offense, it's really hard to learn in this coronavirus atmosphere where you're on your own, you're not on the practice field. So Cooper Rush obviously has a leg up on Colt, on Daniel, on everybody, as he already knows this offense. So now you want to put him in the number 2 spot. And then if you say, well, one's 2 and one's 3, what's the difference? They'll carry 3 quarterbacks. Well, then you just squeezed out Alex Tanney. And I will tell you this. Somebody I talked to, a coach I talked to, a longtime NFL assistant coach who specializes in quarterbacks, who was very interested in working for the Giants this year, told me that when he asked around, he was told Alex Tanney was so important to Daniel Jones's rookie year success. I'm not knocking Eli Manning, but that Tanney was in Daniel Jones's pocket. He did so much of the prep work for him. He taught him how to be a pro. He literally shadowed him. He did a lot of work for him, helped him break down film, helped him learn how to go about a day as an NFL quarterback. So now you're squeezing him out. The guy told me he was told if you work for the Giants in 2020, you have to keep Alex Tanney. Well, Alex Tanney with Cooper Rush here is now the 4th quarterback. You're not keeping 4 quarterbacks. No. So somebody's got to go, right? McCoy, who has guaranteed money, Cooper Rush, who is Jason Garrett's boy, as you call him, or Alex Tanney, who is Daniel Jones's boy. And then I guess you keep Case Cookus on the practice squad if he looks good. But one of those veterans is out of a job, and really you can make a case that any of them should be the number 2 guy.
Yeah, I get. Well, we know McCoy's not going anywhere, so because you can't. I mean, he's just like you said, he's reliable. There's no way you're getting rid of him. And then you mentioned guaranteed money, so it's going to be Rush and Tanney. They're going to battle it out. And
do you keep one of them? Some teams don't even keep 3 quarterbacks. I would think you have to keep one of those 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because of the fact that you have McCoy, and you would think, look, the Giants are an up-and-coming team, so they need talent, young talent. They can't be. That's not a team that should have 3 quarterbacks when you have your number 1 starter. So it does. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting.
Unless you try to stash one on the practice squad, because now there's no limits on practice squad experience anymore, and you can have 12 guys on your practice squad.
Yeah.
You could try to stash one, but then, Cooper Rush or who could get picked up off your practice squad.
Possible. Yeah. Well, that's what we'll talk about during training camp. So in general, what did you think about the Giants draft?
Thought it was good. I think I graded it like a B, somewhere like the 13th to 16th best draft of anybody in the NFL. Look, they've had a lot of bad drafts, so I don't think there's a Flowers, Eli Apple component that's going to blow up this draft. But I don't think it was, necessarily a home run draft either, especially like I said, they came away without a pass rusher. I was stunned that the 3rd and 4th rounds they didn't pick a pass rusher.
But this was also a tough year for pass rushers. There really weren't a lot available, especially.
But there was a guy they liked, Zach Bond. I know they liked from Wisconsin.
And he lasted a while. Yeah.
Yes, he slipped into the 70s, and Giants didn't make any kind of move up to try to go get him. I was surprised by that. And really, when I'm thinking about it, all I can do is think that they should have had him because they gave up that 68th pick to the Jets for Leonard Williams.
Thank you very much.
And really, to me, that's hanging over the entire Giants.
And the Jets are very thankful, by the way, for that.
That pick meant they couldn't draft Bond or some other pass rusher at 68. That pick meant that trade meant that they now have Williams on $16 million or more on the salary cap, which would be better spent on Jadeveon Clowney or two Marcus Goldens.
Sure.
It meant that, that they still don't have Leonard Williams signed to a long-term extension, so it's the possible distraction of him playing on a franchise tag. To me, the whole trade is a disaster for so many reasons, and like I said, it starts with the fact that they didn't have the 68th pick in the draft. They had to wait till 98 to pick in the 3rd round.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk more about Leonard Williams and that whole deal because, again, as a Jet fan, that was a disappointing player that never reached what they thought would be a big potential. Giants now feel that there's that potential there that maybe is untapped. So I don't know. We'll talk more about that when we get to training camp. But
eventually, you are what you are.
Yeah, at this point, you're right. Especially, I mean, look, this will be his first full year with the new team, though. So I guess we'll give him one more year.
Yeah, and then next year we'll say it's his first year outside. It's his first year outside of New York.
Yeah, no, we won't do that. Oh, by the way, as you did mention, when you were talking about a couple of guys that like Hernandez and that need to, are they going to get any better? Maybe that's what the new coaching staff can do. You bring in the new coaching staff, and they can get the best out of some of those players.
Well, that's what makes a good NFL coaching staff.
Yes.
Is guys who make the players better.
That's right.
And look, I don't think that necessarily happened very often with the last Giants coaching staff or the one before that. Like I can't. It's been very hard for me to, and that's not a knock on the head coach or any specific assistant coach. It's just the group together didn't really. There haven't been many Giants players in the last 5 years where you're like, wow, that guy played so much better than I thought he would.
Yeah.
That just really hasn't happened since the days of like Victor Cruz and Mario Manningham. It just really Darius Slayton would be the one guy last year, and they kept wide receiver coach Tyke Tolbert. Like Darius Slayton would be the one guy in the last 5 years who you were like, wow, that guy was so much better than I thought he was.
That's when you're slightly less than mediocre, which is exactly what the Giants have been during that stretch. So
yeah, look, they have the worst 3-year record in the NFL over the last 3 years. So
I didn't realize that. That's pretty bad. That's very un-New York Giant franchise like. That's more Jet like, to tell you the truth. But
yeah,
whatever.
Look, I think Judge. My early impression of Judge, I think he has a good feel for everything. I think the players will respect him. I think he's got a good grasp on the PR, the being the face of a franchise. We'll just, see how he handles actually being a head coach. So.
Yep, and then we'll learn a lot more whenever we can get training camp underway, which we definitely can't wait for that to start happening. And first things first, and that's getting him back to camp. And before we let you go, last thing, when do you think that's going to happen? Guess?
Great question. I do think that there'll be, right now, we just had a conference call yesterday with all the top people in the league, the CMO and the Troy Vincent, Roger Goodell, all those, Jeff Pash, the league counsel, all those people. My gut feeling says I think they'll be back in late July. I think training camps will start on time, and I think they will have just one of those scenarios where you have to get your temperature screened every day when you walk in the building. When there's a positive test, you get quarantined for 3 weeks. I think it'll be one of those scenarios where they will have training camp, but it'll be very limited in terms of probably no fans at camps, maybe limited media days, limited, not 27 equipment managers. Yeah. It'll be a very limited number of people around the players and coaches as much as possible.
Well, I mean, Jet fans already know what's going to happen, that Sam Darnold is going to wind up catching it. And that'll happen week before week 1, and he'll be out the first 3 weeks of the season. So
big year for Sam.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about that as well in the next couple of months. All right, Ryan, appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we'll be also talking about the rest of the NFL real soon too, but training camp can't get here fast enough.
Thanks for having me.